So good morning, and we welcome to our final Sunday of our 10-week series, uh, Trusting the Process of Change. So let's begin with our song this morning.
I'm in the right place at the right time. I am just where I'm supposed to be. I'm in the right place at the right time. I am just where I'm supposed to be. Oh, my soul is welcome here. Oh, my soul is welcome here. I am getting the message loud and clear. My soul is welcome here. I'm in the right place at the right time. I am just where I'm supposed to be. I'm in the right place at the right time. I am just where I'm supposed to be. Oh, my soul is welcome here. Oh, my soul is welcome here. I am getting the message loud and clear. My soul is welcome here. I am getting the message loud and clear. My soul is welcome here.
So let's just take a moment now and allow those words to sink in. Know that there is this loving presence that in every moment is welcoming us right now in this moment and all the moments. Wherever we go, whatever we do, when we share with each other, when we connect, always that invitation. You belong, we belong. And so we hold for this morning on our final of this series that our soul has said yes, that we've made this commitment to trust the process of change. And we hold for all those that are joining us in all sorts of ways and time zones through YouTube or our Facebook. We know that they are part of this community of souls, and we've created together a consciousness, a welcoming, an opening consciousness, so that as we face these coming days, as things continue to change in our life, in our families, with our friends, in the world, we know that we embrace a power, a connection that heals, that welcomes. And so we say our prayer together, holding that there is one mind, one heart, one breath that connects us all. Oh, great love, thank you for living and loving in us and through us. May all that we do flow from our deep connection with you and all beings. Listen to our heart's longings for the healing of our world as we open to the infinite field of compassion, wisdom, justice, peace, and radiant well-being that is always available. And from this place of conscious oneness, we choose to live in your flow. And we offer our prayers in all the holy names of God. Amen and amen. So as I mentioned, this is our last Sunday for this series. We are taking a break in September, and we will begin a new series beginning the first Sunday in October, and then every first Sunday through to June when we come back to Chautauqua. And we invite ministers, Unity ministers from all over to celebrate, and we'll share that as well online. So our series beginning in October is Embracing Conflict and Creating Peace. And the underlying theme, and this one we have to take a deep breath, one is living as nothing and no one is against you. So we're going to doing that the same time, first Sundays, and then we're going to have a Wednesday night discussion group. So you'll get the information. You can also look at our website to connect and to review these 10 weeks if you want. That is unitychq.org. And Chautauqua is unitychq.org. So I hope you will join us. So now for our final week, Janine is going to lead us into our final holding this truth of change at a deeper level. Janine.
This is called One Clear Voice. The whole world is talking, drowning out my voice. How can I hear myself with all this noise? But all this confusion just disappears when I find a quiet place where I can hear one clear voice calling out for me to listen. One clear voice whispers words of wisdom. I close my eyes till I find what I've been missing. And if I'm very still, I will hear one clear voice. I'm always searching for which path to take. Sometimes I'm so afraid to make mistakes. From somewhere inside me, stronger than my fears, just like the sound of music to my ears, I hear one clear voice calling out for me to listen. One clear voice whispers words of wisdom. I close my eyes till I find what I've been missing. And if I'm very still, I will hear one clear If I'm very still, I will hear one clear voice.
So I get very emotional in that song, thinking about the weeks that we've looked at change and understood endings and that time where we feel like we're in the wilderness and new beginnings. And understanding, last week we talked about the evolution, that we're actually part of an evolution in consciousness as we go through change, that every step we take, to me, the ultimate is, do we get to a place where we're not so devastated by change? Is there a place where we can start sinking into that one clear voice and we start shifting things easier, more lovingly for ourselves and for others? Well, when I asked Janine about this song, because it's on her CD, and I was listening, looking for the song, and we were going back and forth. And as soon as we picked this, something else came into my life that changed how I was going to speak today. A library book came due. I get them over the internet from my library sometimes. And I'd been waiting months for this book. And a couple of days, as soon as we made the decision for this music, the book comes due, and I start reading it on the side beside working on what I was going to say today. And it aligned so unbelievably, and it took the song to this deep level. And the book is called Untamed. And it's by a woman named Glennon Doyle. And she went through this struggle to find out who she was. And she lived in a situation, in a life that was so unlike that deep down voice inside of her. And that resulted in her addiction, being bulimic. And she tells the story of coming out of this and finding that voice. And she calls that voice, for her word is knowing, with a capital K, that she gets this loving presence that she can sink deep into. And she started taking all her taming in her life, the way she'd been tamed by culture and church and this stuff, and found that untamed place inside of her that was energized. And she begins the book with this story that just got me. And I've read it, the first part. And by the way, I've only read a third of the book because it's one that you just sit with. And it was called Cheetah Run. And she describes how this is like her life, that her and her wife went to the zoo to take their two little girls. And there's something called Cheetah Run. And they went up to the bar to watch this. And the zookeeper comes out, this young woman, and there's a Jeep on the run and a rope. And on the end is a pink bunny. And she brings out a Labrador named Millie. And she says that Millie has a friend, this cheetah named Tabitha. And they like to play together. And Tabitha copies Millie. So she wanted to demonstrate what Millie could do. So Millie the lab, they take the Jeep, they run it out with the rabbit jumping, the dirty pink rabbit behind it. And of course, what does Millie do? She chases it and grabs it and shakes it with her head. So then they bring out Tabitha. And same thing, that Tabitha, they take the Jeep and Tabitha goes and gets the pink rabbit and shakes it. And then she waits because Tabitha's going to get something special. She's going to get a steak. Well, then they start, the crowd, the young children are invited to ask questions. And one of the children says, "Is Tabitha sad?" And she said, "Doesn't she miss the wild?" And the zookeeper said, no, she's not sad. This is all she knows. She was born here. And so she wouldn't even know what to do in the wild. In fact, this makes her happy here because she's really much safer than she would be in the wild. And Glennon, at this point, is saying her stomach just clenched. And she felt this knowing like that she had been tamed her whole life like that. And how this represented that, like the zookeeper reminded her of this idea of culture and things that tame us. And she noted then that the zookeeper let Tabitha back into this big area behind them. And all of a sudden, she noticed that Tabitha got up higher. She was looking around. She started heading towards the fence, watching and looking beyond her fence and stalking things. And her little daughter pulls on her hand and says, "Mommy, Mommy." Tabitha's turned wild again. And I thought about the word, that one clear voice. How do we get it? Part of us is to undo some of the taming that we've each had. And not that taming is totally, I mean, there's some cultural taming that's probably good. It's good not to scream fire in a theater, right? There are lots of ways that we are taught as little children not to scream at people, to consider other people's feelings. Wonderful way of creating our humanity. But there's also ways in which we are tamed out of our divinity. That untamed part that we knew as a child that would have directed us had anyone said, "I see you," right? If somebody had looked at us and said, "I see you," rather than from the outset said, "This is how I want you to behave and follow the rules." And especially at the time when I was raised in the 50s and 60s, this was pretty common way. Hopefully I've raised my daughter a different way than that. She is much more outspoken, believe me, that she's very willing to share her thoughts and feelings with me, but I wasn't. It was, and many of you probably have heard this line, some of you may not even believe that anybody would tell a kid this, but it was, "Children are to be seen and not heard," or "I'll give you something to cry about if you cry." So you were limited. And I started thinking about what was the untamed part. And I've done this for years, try to recapture so that I can hear. And it is in that untamed part, that part of us that this book so demonstrates. She talks about undoing all these messages to get to this voice inside, this knowing. And I've worked bit by bit. And I remember that my hardest taming came at about probably the age of 10. Up to that point, I could be found maybe in my house. My mom was really strict about taming us and us being absolutely obedient, never questioning everything. But out in the playground, I would swing on a swing and I would see as high as I could go. And I would try to jump and I would get filthy because I would just fall into the dirt. I would hang upside down on the monkey bars. And in fact, I'd even hang by my heels if somebody wasn't watching, to prove that I could do it. I would just do all these things all the time. And I ran, by the way, up till I was about 10 with boys because they were more untamed. And they had that part of me that wanted to express itself with this high energy, willing to risk things. But at about 11 or so, I was told I could no longer wear shorts to school. I needed to wear a dress and get a training bra. And all of a sudden, during recess, and back then elementary school went to 6th grade, I had to sit on the sideline watching. And I look back at that and I realized that I was really sad during that time. And it's just taken all these years to get back to that. And so we can think of that taming is keeping us small, not exploring or developing who we are. Mark Nepone, maybe some of you know, he's a poet and he writes, and he wrote a book called The Exquisite Risk. And he also wrote the Book of Awakening. So if you ever get a chance to get those books, they're phenomenal. He had stage 4 cancer, and he made his way through it by using by basically taking these layers of himself off that had been put on him by expectations from the outside. And he wanted to switch it to, what is this that is speaking to me from the inside? And I thought about the words exquisite risk. That's what he's saying the spiritual journey is. It's an exquisite risk. And so how do we face our lives knowing that we can embrace change and listening and learning and maybe parting with some of the things that our culture continues to tell us are the most valued things, but that don't suit us. And know that underneath that, even though it's risky, it will be exquisite. So thinking about going back to Robert Brummett's book and our trusting the process of change and his transformation, the idea that we're going to want to hold on to those things. In this chapter, it's called Beyond Change. And to me, to get beyond change is to move through change and to continually let go. And he says, but just realize that you're going to want to hold on, and that many of the people in your life and relationships, as you start doing this letting go process, some of those relationships I found have let go and new ones have come in. And the one thing that's beyond also always change is that there's always love. Like the minute I'm willing to be who my soul language, that soul essence is just quietly, as the song said, that one clear voice whispers. It whispers to us. It's not loud. The world is loud, right? And he mentions, Robert Brummett says, it's like if you're holding on to these things that you feel safe, that you're not willing to do this exquisite risk. It's like building a house, building a castle, a sand castle, and soon a storm will wash it away. Jesus says something very similar in Matthew. He says about the foolish man that builds his house on the sand, and the storm and the winds come. And he said, then there is the wise man that builds his house on a rock. And so what we're looking at today in this final chapter of finding yourself in transition is, what is the rock? What is the changeless? And if we can move beyond just being caught up in protecting ourselves so that nothing changes. And by the way, I realize that I'm pretty good at wanting to protect myself. And when I want to keep things all in order, guess what I do? And you might do this too. I try to control other people. I don't just control myself to keep things in order. I want other people to make me feel safe too. So what's so interesting about this changelessness, this exquisite risk, is when you start risking, you start giving other people permission to do the same thing. And so in our book, in this final chapter, I want to read to you some of the things that he says, that the essence of taking this risk into that clear voice, that still voice, is to, this word. I've just probably used this word and practiced it, then forgot it, then practiced surrender. And this is what he says from the book. By fully surrendering to the process of change, we are referring to an attitude of surrendering to the natural flow of life. We are surrendering to the natural flow. This attitude of surrender is sometimes referred to many other names, such as non-resistance, acceptance, non-attachment. Whatever it's called, it refers to the way in which we meet moment by moment the experiences of our life. To surrender fully is to be open in a deep way to each experience of our life. And so when we're trying to hold on and not change, usually we're either in our past or thinking about the future, and we're not in the moment. So one of the secrets of surrender is to embrace each moment. And this is really hard. But until we embrace it, we cannot change ourselves and deal with the change. But we have to be able to say, this belongs. This too belongs. This week, my dog took some of you know, I have this dog. She's about 60 pounds. She's part Rhodesian Ridgeback, Sandra D. Some of you met her in Chautauqua. My friends here have met her. She's a delight, the sweetest thing. She had knee replacement. She was going gun-ho. And the vet gave her permission to have the cone off her head and take her on short walks. By Sunday night, when I saw you last, her leg was all inflamed. She couldn't walk on it. I was in the emergency room and Monday morning and with her at the emergency vets for hours. And they've taken care of it. They've stitched her back up. She had actually opened it. And on antibiotics again and painkillers, and she is on 3 feet for a while. And so, as you can guess, on Monday night, this was a change that I didn't want. And so, did I sleep Monday night, or did I worry about what's happened? Because here she is in pain again. She's downstairs. There's no bed downstairs, but I spent most of the day with her. And I got this. I thought in the moment, what's the truth here? How can this belong? I don't feel that my words, although I prayed for her, would heal her. I didn't sense that. The message I got instead was my job was to love her. And that small voice came, and I stopped this pattern of worrying. And when I came down, I just massaged her and loved her. And actually, I did this Sunday lesson with her. I was writing notes and doing things, laying next to her and petting her. And the shift happened from worry to surrender, to surrender. What is trying to happen in this moment? What is God calling forth? Me. What is this energy, whether you call it God, but this energy in the universe that as you start trusting it, you'll find there is this love that just keeps answering our questions. It's amazing that we can sit there and argue with what is, or we can sink deep into what is asking to be created out of this situation. So Robert continues, he says, it requires a willingness to look at each part of ourselves that arises, which I was doing, denying nothing, condemning. I was condemning because I was worrying about her. I was holding on, nothing, simply observing our thoughts, feelings, desires, memories, and physical sensations, and then letting go. That is a practice that has worked for me over and over. And just as many times as it worked, I have not used it. And I've gone through the suffering and the pain and the wanting things to be different and not getting to that place where I say, this too belongs. And this too, I can express God through this situation. It doesn't mean I have to like the situation, but it does mean that there's a part of me that can bring wholeness to it. So as we talk about surrender, there's a few things that it's not, because surrender can have a bad name, right? We can say it's giving up, or it's quitting, or being a doormat, or resigning, or feeling despair. But Robert says this one sentence about surrender that just hit me. And I know I'd read this book maybe 10 years ago, but I'd forgotten this. And I'm just sad that it didn't stay with me, because it just really gives the gift in surrender. And he says this: surrender is a conscious giving over of oneself to something greater. Wow, it's not giving up. It's saying that this way of dealing it, the way the outer world has maybe programmed me to deal with it, that there is something greater. There is a greater way if I give myself over, if I stop listening to these outer messages, and I really trust, and it takes trust to believe in this. And how you do it? I can't wait to finish the rest of the book, Untamed, because she talks about that, about how she keeps getting to this knowing, into this sinking. But little ways that you can do it is you're driving your car and somebody cuts you off, and you surrender and you find peace. And at Christmas time, when I would be shopping and going somewhere or to a restaurant or something was busy, I would just surrender into the parking lot, into giving people lots of space. So all these small little ways that every day we can just relax into the moment. And what happens when the big things happen, like what is happening now in our country, we can be that place of surrender, knowing that there is a clear voice, but that it whispers. It whispers to us. And only when we get all these distractions. So what is the opposite of surrender? And I bet you know, it's resistance. And I've been the queen of resistance in my life. And one of the ways that Robert Brummett says it shows up primarily, and we talked about this maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, is in a tightness, a rigidity in our bodies. That's funny thing is that we can say to each other, oh yeah, this is all right, I'm cool with it. Check in with your body. Shoulders tight, jaw tight, lower back, stomach, all these things, rather than saying, what can I take medicine-wise to get rid of it? Not that medicine isn't sometimes really valuable, but also before we cover it up, let's go into it. And like Brummett says, is what is the message here? What am I holding tight and not wanting to change and upset? And how can I say this too belongs in some way? Because it's reality. What has happened belongs. So one of the things is that he mentions all these different ways. How do you know you're in resistance? And as I've been thinking this week, I added a bunch of ways. How do I know? I'm either in the past thinking, oh gosh, I wish it were, I can't believe, and I did this with Sandra D this week. I said, oh gee, I can't believe that I wasn't more careful with her. I did something wrong. What did I do? Blah, blah, blah. There we go. Didn't help her at all. Or I went into the future, which the vet helped scare me on that. This infection could grow and become big, and she could lose her leg or have a resurgery, all that too. And the vet needed to tell me those things so that I would be careful with her. But at the same time, I could feel my body tightening up. And the way to be part of the wholeness that wants to express through my dog, through me, is not to allow that, to say, I understand this, and so all the ways that he mentions that we can tell that we're resistant when we're angry. And we talked about angry maybe a month or so ago, that it is an important feeling. This is not to deny these feelings. They are our wake-up call. They are a gift, all these feelings. Now, if you were taught to, as I was taught, that you couldn't feel angry, and that actually my mother would get angry at me if I felt angry and would spank me to make sure that I wasn't angry. So it might be a little challenging for me to feel. That's one of my big ones: anger, fear. Other things I wrote down is one of my favorite ways is when I'm resisting is I procrastinate when I'm afraid of something to do. That and instead of looking at what am I afraid of doing, I'll just I can find anything else to do. Controlling is another way. When I'm starting to put things on either myself, wanting everything in order, or someone else, I am in this state of resistance. And every time I'm in a state of resistance, what happens is I make the issue worse. I cut off the wisdom of this internal dialogue, this internal soul language that's wishing to express through me. And so resistance magnifies things. Now, I have a funny story. I've just really over the weeks told you some of the things that I've done that maybe made it more difficult for me. And my friends from Florida will know this story. We bought a house right after I came. My husband bought this house and he was so happy about it right after I came out of ministerial school. And I didn't have a ministry yet. I eventually got one, but it was an hour north of this house. And he thought I'd be so pleased with the house, a gigantic house, because it looked like North Carolina. And I thought, I need to please him. He supported me through ministry. He was amazing. And so he wants a big house. He's wanted one his whole life. I've never wanted one. So we're both thinking we're pleasing the others. But not only was it a big house, but it was a very old house. And we'd never had an old house before. Our first house together for 18 years was 5 years old, and which gradually had repairs. And the second one in Missouri, in Kansas City, when I went, just was only 2 years old. And everything was so I could spend time studying and doing this. Well, 6 months into having this house, I get a ministry. And I am now traveling an hour from the house each way. And then 6 months after that, my mother breaks her hip, and now I need to rearrange their whole lives, to sell their home, to do all this, do ministry. And there's always some surprise at the house. Well, I couldn't be aggravated at my parents. I didn't want to be aggravated at church. So I decided to feel very victim-y about the house. My husband was traveling, so I could come home during the week. I could, because I worked on weekends with church often, well, every Sunday, but often Saturdays too. So I could be there for all these contractors. We had amazing things happen, roofs caving in to 2 rooms. But the funniest one was we had bees in one of our walls, a giant hive of bees where a whole wall had to be taken out. And the funny thing was about it is later I'm walking my dogs past a neighbor's house, and she went, there was a swarm of bees that came into my big oak tree. She had this big hole in her oak tree. And she said, where did that come from? And I was going, oh my God. I had my wall opened up and there the bees went. So it was one thing after another. And by 2008, we bought it 2004. I said, I can't do this. I can't do this with my parents and this and that. We're going to put it up for sale. And guess what happened in 2008? Right? The whole housing market just plummeted. So I just, okay. But did I surrender to the fact that we are now in the house? I did not. We had that house for 10 years. And for 9.5 years, I did not surrender. And many of my friends can tell you, I told stories about it. And then I listened I was teaching a class on prosperity, and the prosperity teacher at church said how she sold her house, that she loved it. It was at the same time, the same thing, the 2008. Now it had been a few years, but still houses weren't selling good. And she talked about how she decided, instead of being unhappy with her house, to love it. So I go, okay, I'm going to do that. And I went home and I started loving my house. And when the next repair, and I was writing, and we wrote lots of big checks over those years, I wrote the check and I loved the check. And I thanked the house that it housed us. And I thanked the neighborhood because it was an incredible neighborhood, diverse and interesting and eclectic. And I had this big lot with 20 big oak trees. So I used to complain about all the leaves and the gutters, and it was constantly cleaning. And when the hurricane came through, oh my goodness, in 2004, that was an amazing cleanup job. But within a few months, somebody knocked. I was working on my Sunday lesson, and I was in my office, and the office had a front window looking out. A car pulls up and somebody knocks on our door. And remember, things aren't selling that good still. And he knocks on the door and he said, would you be willing to sell your house? Now, I've been loving on this house for 6 months. No matter what showed up, whatever repair, all the things that went wrong, and there were a list of them, I decided to love it, to absolutely love it. So we didn't need a realtor. He found somebody to do the paperwork. His wife, her parents lived 2 blocks away, and they were getting to the age, and she had loved this house forever. She'd gone by it. She wanted this house. She's an artist and had these giant windows with all this light everywhere. 2-story, parts of it were 2-story and open with big fireplace and just all this light. And she's an artist. And so in 1 month, what I'd struggled with 9.5 years of deciding to resist. And so Robert Brummett said that when we give up resistance and we surrender, magic happens. Probably sounds pretty magical about the house. Time after time, when I remember this, thank God I haven't done anything else at 9.5 years. Most things in a short time. I'll tell you with Reverend Jessie that she's been on a couple times in this 10 weeks, and she and I did youth ministry together. And we were both Unity licensed teachers in a very large church with a big youth ministry, and we had a blast doing it. It was just so fun. And I had taught Sunday school way before that for years, and I taught something called Uniteens. And if you're not familiar with Uniteens are middle schoolers. Nobody wanted to teach those. And so when I said yes, and my daughter was in middle school, it's because they were considered the most difficult group. I found them charming because it was like they had 1 foot in childhood and 1 foot. So the girls were putting on makeup and the boys were hitting each other and hitting the girls. So it was a challenge. Well, when she and I took over that, and I was no longer a Sunday school teacher, we had no one for Uniteens. And so we prayed about it. We got together, and instead, now we could have resisted this. We could have started a story, right? We're never going to have anybody. People liked YOU, which is the high schoolers, because they were really cool. And you could really communicate. And then people like the little kids. They're so sweet and they just hug you. Uniteens don't hug you. They challenge you. And they challenge authority, and it's so interesting. But anyhow, we're like, and we decided not to have that story. What we decided to do was to pray and hold that there was this place for this missing teacher that we didn't have, because one of us really didn't want to teach the class because there were so many classrooms to go around on Sunday to help out with whatever needed to happen in there. So when we finished, and I'm saying when we finish this prayer, holding how much we love these kids and surrendering it totally and just saying, it's done. You know, if I have to teach, we'll teach, but we are just so clear that it's all perfect. We get a knock on the door, and this woman comes in. She just joined the church, and from another Unity church. She just moved in the area, and she said, you know, I taught Uniteens, and I was wondering, do you have a place for me? And Jessie and I are looking at each other and going, oh yeah, we do. We get her to fill out all the paperwork because we have to do background checks and things like that. The minute she walks out, Jessie and I start dancing around because we had a Christ candle lit. You know, we do it for prayer, and we just started dancing and laughing and holding each other and hugging. Can it be that way? Is the question I'm going to leave you with. Can it be that you can move into, and can you trust this? And again, you start out small. Can you trust that there's a synchronicity, a flow, that if you surrender, that if you understand your resistance and not make it wrong, you're not fighting your resistance. This is not, because that'll just make it stronger. But you can watch it and say, whatever's happening, this belongs. And as I honor the fact that my feelings are messengers, they're profound messengers. Our feelings aren't a mistake. They're there to say, something needs attending in love. Something needs attending in peace. Something needs attending with the idea that as we stop pushing this away from us, there's a way, an answer. So I told you about the book from Glennon called Untamed. And just this amazing book that talks about getting there. Well, there's another book that you might be interested in, and I saw him speak. It's called The Surrender Experiment. Maybe some of you have done The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And I want to leave you with a couple questions that he asks in that book about, and the whole book is about him in the business world and in his spiritual life, surrendering and surrendering and surrendering. And he talks about it as if there's something this energy of the universe is going to put in front of me. And as Glennon says, this knowing, there's this knowing. She doesn't call it God, but she calls it this loving present energy that is continually guiding if I'll get quiet enough to listen. And so these are the questions that he asks himself and asks us. Am I better off making up an alternative reality in my mind and then fighting that reality to make it be my way? Or am I better off letting go of what I want and serving the same forces of reality that manage to create the entire perfection of the universe around me? Well, that's a big question. Can you believe in that universe? And the other question he asks, what would happen if I respected the flow of life and used my free will to participate with what is unfolding instead of fighting it? To remind you about what Robert Brummett says about that exquisite risk in surrendering. Surrender is a conscious giving over of oneself to something greater. So let's take that into meditation.
As I say a tender yes to everything that comes to me, my heart is open, I am free, I open to all that is. It brings me as I say a tender yes to everything that comes to me. My heart is open, I am free. I open to all that is. It brings me to my knees. I surrender. I am peace.
So as we take a deep breath, just do a gentle inventory from the top of our head through our bodies, just saying yes to, if there's tightness in our forehead, we just say a tender yes. You can relax and be free. Around our eyes, with such tenderness, we feel them softening. Not only the muscles, but the way that our eyes look upon the world. And if we sometimes clench our jaw, and we again say tenderly, so tenderly, we don't have to hold back who we are. We can just soften. And again, through our neck and our shoulders, that yes to the freedom of surrender to a greater knowing that beyond change is the changeless invitation from Spirit, from our universe, to continually move towards wholeness. And so we invite our shoulders and our neck just to say yes to that. Yes. No longer in charge of the world, I can relax. No longer needing to control. Where everything belongs is an opportunity for love to win, for peace to prevail, for wonder to express itself. And then through our stomach and our torso again, that tender yes to all that comes. And we just breathe in to our body. The God of our being saying, I've got this, I've got this. I can move into this place of surrendering consciously to this greater good. And now through my hips and legs, no longer needing to hold that in my body. And again, a deep breath. As I thank my body for the messages it gives, knowing that when it's stressed or tight, that it is just an invitation again, inviting me. Knowing that when I'm worrying or angry or fearful, again, the invitation to hear that quietness below the changes, the invitation. So we say a tender yes now to ourselves, our lives, our world in the silence. Again, the breath and the softening. Remembering to be tender with ourselves, to be tender with each other, to be tender in our world. And so it is. Amen and amen.
As I say a tender yes to everything that comes to me, my heart is open, I am free, I open to all that is, it brings me to my knees, I surrender, I am peace.
Thank you, Janine. And thank you for that song, for both those songs. I probably could listen to them if I started my day with those songs, I imagine that I would remember all the time. So now is the time when we move through that, knowing that in these 10 weeks, we have been a part of this bringing our consciousness. It's required all of you, not just myself and Janine and Reverend Jesse, but all of us have created this consciousness that has allowed this to move forward, to keep us connected. And so I'm just really grateful. And we're going to do, I invite you now to do our offering together. And so if you just hold your hands out and consider what you're offering to the world. As we give our gift, we know the greatest gift we can give is that surrendering into love and knowing that inside us, that small, clear voice that whispers, is the greatest gift we can give. So with that knowing, let's say it together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And I am grateful.
I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed.
So I invite you now to bring to consciousness our world, and I've got my world holding here. And just imagine that, and know that it's not imagining, it's really knowing that your consciousness, every time we hold something, that we are part of that evolutionary consciousness of the world. So as we say our unity prayer of protection, let's hold for our world. This is not only true for us, for our families, for our country, but we also own it for our world. So together, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Thank you, God. And thank you for spending these 10 weeks together in helping us shift during this very changing times, to shift more and more love, to bring more and more love into the world. And so we're going to say